Hey economics students, so in this video we're going to look at how the RBA actually changes the cash rate. Why am I doing this to you? Well, one, because it's how they actually do it and it's good for real life, but two, some of the resources you read are going to use this method called the corridor. So let's remember, banks have ES accounts at the RBA, and it's just a way for them to transact with each other and the RBA and the government. They use a special type of money called ES balances, or sometimes called reserves in other systems. And remember that commercial banks in Australia, in order to stay a commercial bank, they have to maintain a positive ES account with the RBA. Now, what the RBA is going to do is they're going to set or incentivize a ceiling and a floor to ensure that transactions take place between a corridor. So they can't actually control the exact cash rate, but they can control a sort of corridor, sometimes called a policy corridor, where transactions will take place. So let's just remember that if a bank needs to borrow, if one of the commercial banks has overdrawn their ES account and they need to top up their ES balance, well, they'll borrow from another bank. And if one bank has a surplus ES balance, then they might lend to another bank. Okay, and it's using this sort of dynamic here that the RBA can set the ceiling and control the interest rate or the cash rate. So it makes more sense when we look at it. So let's remember we're looking at a demand and supply curve, but we're looking at the price or the market for overnight money. So price becomes the cash rate, which is the rate of borrowing in the overnight money market, again, where banks settle their ES balances. You'll notice that the supply curve is perfectly inelastic, and that's because there is a fixed amount of this kind of money, this ES balances in the banking system, and it's only the RBA that can control this. You'll also notice this ceiling here. So these red lines here are the ceiling and the floor, and they're also known as the savings rate, or they're more technically known as the savings rate and the lending rate. And the lending rate is just the rate at which the RBA will lend to commercial banks should they not be able to source money elsewhere. So as a backup, if you can't borrow from another bank and you're needing to top up your ES balance, you can borrow from the RBA at the lending rate. It's the ceiling. The lending rate is always going to be the cash rate plus 25 basis points. So this is important because why would you pay any more if you could borrow from the RBA at 2.1%? Well, you're never going to pay a cent over that, or a percent over that, I should say. So it becomes the highest rate, or the ceiling. The same goes for the floor. So this line here, this 1.75 is the floor, or also known, or technically known as the savings rate. And that's the rate that you can leave your ES balance in your ES account at the RBA, and you'll receive the savings rate from the RBA. This is always going to be the cash rate target minus 0.1% or 10 basis points. Now, again, this is important. This is the floor because if you can effectively lend your money or deposit your money at the RBA for this rate, why would you lend it to anyone else at a lower rate? Well, you wouldn't. So this becomes the floor. No transaction will take place outside this corridor. Now, you can also see the green line here, which is the cash rate target, and it's the same as the actual cash rate in this demand and supply diagram, which is where demand and supply intersect. But demand may increase or decrease, which we'll look at in a moment, changing the cash rate from the cash rate target. You also kind of note that there are these perfectly elastic parts of the demand curve, which is a bit weird, but that's just saying that, well, we're not going to go above 2.1 and we're not going to go below 1.75 for the reasons I've just described. So what happens if there is an increase in demand, maybe something to do with the banking sector? So if there's an increase in demand for ES balances from the overnight money market, demand shifts to the right. And you can see that the new equilibrium, the new cash rate here is actually above the target cash rate. Okay, and that's okay. Remember, the RBA can't control the actual cash rate. They have a target, but the actual cash rate can be anywhere within this corridor. Okay, so the most important part is how does the RBA actually change the cash rate target? Let's imagine it wants to raise rates by 10 basis points or 0.1%. And actually, this is the simple part. So all they're going to do is increase the lending rate and increase the saving rate, and therefore shift the corridor up 10 basis points. And it looks like this. So you can see the savings rate has gone from 1.75 to 1.85, which is the cash rate target minus 1.1%. The cash rate target is now 1.95, so it's actually the same as the actual cash rate. And the ceiling is now 2.2, which is the lending rate plus 25 basis points. Now transactions will take place in between the new corridor. And if they wanted to decrease the cash rate, they'd do the same, just the opposite way. All right, so hopefully that helps. Remember, if you've already learned the other way, you can definitely use that. Just wanted to show you how this actually works. Nice to know. And also if you come across it in any of the resources. All right, bye for now.